Hi everybody, so my name is Mark Howarth. I'm the Global Head of P&C Analytics and other organisations, perhaps HR Analytics. Real shame I can't be there with you and all of us to be there together. So it's a little bit tricky to present both virtually and recorded, but I hope you can get the most from this. And of course, at any time, if you have questions during or even after the presentation, very happy to follow up. This has very much been a kind of trial and error for me in establishing an employee listening program for PMI. So plenty that we've learned from and very happy to share. What I wanted to do first is talk about Philip Morris International. So all of the context of this presentation is very much about how to do people analytics and particularly employee listening in a transformation. So most of you working for international organizations, there'll be some form of transformation going on. Might be a digital transformation, cost transformation. You might be moving into new products, perhaps even new sectors. Philip Morris's transformation is perhaps as vast and as deep as I've ever seen an organization go through. We're moving from a business to business organization to a business to consumer organization, changing our core product and really transforming that and revolutionizing that from conventional combustible cigarettes to what we call risk reduced products. So those are normally heated tobacco products, and the organization has put a huge amount of investment into that. And you can see the kind of three pillars of that transformation. One is changing the external dialogue that we have with the public and with many regulators. The other is then the product portfolio itself, which is really core to the transformation. And the third, which is where people analytics in particular support, is in how we can transform internally. So really this is forming a new organization, creating a new culture, changing the organization structures, changing behaviors, changing ways of working. And to do that, we knew that using data, using insights, and particularly around decision making will be absolutely critical. So most of what I'll talk through today is how people analytics and employee listening have helped with the internal transformation. So a little bit more about who we are in numbers. So obviously a huge number of consumers, around 77,000 employees. That's quite important when we talk about employee listening in particular. Many of those are blue collar workers working in factories. You can see we've got 44 factories around the world, operating 180 markets, big revenue, and lots of the shift in our work has been to scientific research, and we can be seen as perhaps more akin to pharmaceutical organization, hiring in real specialist expertise to many of our research laboratories, and that's been a shift in terms of the employee mix that we have and the needs of the employees as well. So just quickly on how we formed. So I came into the role around 18 months ago, and really was told to kind of explore the new strategy of PMI and make sure that we built a people analytics capability that was meeting Philip Morris's core strategy, and particularly a transformation, and supporting everything that P&C as a function were doing. And P&C really saw their role as being accountable for that internal transformation. So everything around the changes in culture, organization structures, and a big thing that we've done is bringing in the right capability as well. And so our role as people analytics is then trying to understand how do we measure everything that's happening there? What are those right measures? How can we constantly keep people informed and have insights to hand on what decisions to make, and how to sustain and drive a transformation and ensure constantly that they're creating the right impact. Transformations, just by their nature, very, very complex. And there's so many different levers and switches you can pull and push. And so our people analytics team have really been formed around how do we simplify that? How do we show people what the right decisions are to take using data, and using people analytics robust methodologies? So we created 3 capability areas. The first is business intelligence, mostly around creating global dashboards, bringing together all of our data, making that available to people throughout the organization, facing in the business and within P&C. Employee listening, which we'll talk about in more depth throughout the presentation, which is slightly different from just doing an annual survey, but having an always-on approach to employee listening and combining that with EX methodologies. And then the third is strategic insights and planning. And core to what we've been doing there is very much around organization analytics. So in particular, we've been going through many restructures of the functions, regions, changing particularly regions and markets to be more consumer centric in the orientation of their people structures, flattening the structures throughout the organization. And we've been doing that through people analytics. The second big part of the work we've been doing there is strategic workforce planning, which is something we've been working on this year, and we're hoping to scale up into next year at a global level. So this gives you a little bit of an overview to our roadmap of how we've been getting there. The people analytics part I've talked about a little bit. We started in 2018 when I joined, but I didn't really start building a team until about 3 or 4 months later. Some of the big things we've been doing is, again, about bringing together all of that data. And then we're now moving into perhaps more exciting and impactful people analytics on areas like strategic workforce planning, predictive simulation, organization diagnostics, moving from a core of having very good descriptive analytics as a heartbeat for the organization, bringing insights on key metrics and in particular employee listening metrics, but then using that to inform decisions for the future, thinking about future workforce, future organization structures, and the right decisions to make around culture, leadership behavior, and all of that being informed by simulator and workforce planning tools that we're creating. So that's from this year and into next year. For our approach for employee listening, we really had a blank slate. It was, I think, 6 years was the last time that we did an annual survey to 2013. So far before I joined. And it had been a relatively static organization. So we had a cadence of having a annual survey once every 2 years, and knew that in the transformation that we needed to more frequently monitor employee sentiment, ensure that we were nudging around leadership behavior, manager behavior, ways of working, moving from a relatively hierarchical organization to one that was truly collaborative, innovative, and embracing more digital methodologies, and trying to understand pockets of where that was working or not working, and how we could advance was really the core of what our employee listening approach has been doing. We joined very early with the employee experience team in setting that path and creating that strategy for employee listening. The work they were doing was mostly around creating journey maps for different areas of journey, so onboarding, exit experience, the application experience, and they've also moved into moments that matter as well. And our role has been then understanding the right measures to assess the experience that people are receiving, and how one would understand, whether there's particular pain points or highlights for the employees, and uncovering those through different surveys targeted at the employee at that moment in time. So we brought on board a survey platform which helps us to do that, helps us automate all of the surveying, automate the pumping out of the survey, automates the responses, brings that into dashboards that then at every organisation people get access to. We've also created a cadence of having quarterly pulse surveys throughout the organisation globally, and then an annual transformation survey, slightly different from a traditional engagement survey. We use ENPS very much as our target measure, and then we have a range of topics that are much more directed at the transformation, so areas like ways of working, making changes to leadership behaviours and culture, things that we know are really critical to drive the organisation in a different direction. And we still combine that with having an always-on methodology to measure areas around the employee experience. So wanted to deep dive into one of the surveys. I think this makes it brings it a bit more to life for everyone. So this was our biggest survey from last year, and the biggest that's part of the employee listening program, and it's called the transformation survey. So it took us a while to develop this. We spent some time with different regional presidents, different functional leaders, to understand what are the areas that they really want to impact as part of the transformation. What are the areas that are still pain points? What are the areas that they want to monitor and better understand? And we came up with about 40 different questions that fitted into these different dimensions that you can see in the middle there. And then we use that as a basis of a survey that we use globally. So we went out to all of the markets and then employees at every single level using the survey platform. We have a 2-week window for the survey. I think we ended up with around 65% response rate. So quite good, robust in terms of covering multiple demographics, good coverage across regions, functions, and then has enabled us to do both in-depth kind of deep dives into the data and do cross comparisons as well. So we, as part of this, produced analysis at that stage for our most strategic markets, every function, across different demographics. I have created different analysis on gender, on people working in different working arrangements, and comparisons for functions as well. All with ENPS as our core target outcome measure, which has been really, really critical to us. CNPS has a lot of traction in the organisation, particularly as we move to a consumer-facing organisation, and ENPS, the methodology and the scoring, is really well understood, has a lot of traction with the business, and something that we found has made our employee listening program work and sustain and people are always wanting to drive their scores and understand how they can drive those scores. So that's one of the big things that came out of the transformation survey. There's so many different factors as part of any transformation that can help drive the organization into a new direction. And ultimately, a transformation survey has helped us make sense of what is it that's unique to PMI in doing that. What do you need to do in order to drive ENPS, and then know what that will end up driving for CNPS and ultimately the business outcomes of greater revenue, greater market share, the retention of new consumers. So what we've tried to do for every function region is understand which factors on the left-hand side, which are the drivers, really most contribute to that. Is it if we end up changing reward structures? Is it if we give people a fantastic onboarding experience? Is it if their role is made more consumer centric, or they have more clarity on how their role leads to consumer outcomes? What are the things that really count for our employees? And the only way of knowing that is, of course, using data and applying very good, robust people analytics analysis to that. And typical things that we've done are regression analysis and different forms of Bayesian net analysis to understand not only which driver is ending up driving engagement or clarity and confidence in the transformation, but also which combination of drivers, which I'll show you in the next diagram. So this diagram looks very complex. It kind of intends to do that, really. This is the complexity that you have for every manager, every business leader, in thinking, what do I do to drive engagement and drive ENPS and ultimately drive business outcomes? And this helps to then clarify what are the things that are working together to help drive that. It seems very complex, and the analysis uses a Bayesian net analysis, which really looks then at the impact of each of those questions and then dimensions on engagement and how they work together. But it also helps clarify a lot. So in trying to understand within PMI what's driving engagement, it shows you through showing the size of those circles, which is the things you should really concentrate on. And it takes away some of the noise that every business leader can see in front of them through using that type of analysis. And so if you take the example of engagement, one of the biggest factors would be people having a contribution to improving consumer experience. And this is something we didn't necessarily expect. It has a bi-directional relationship. So by people understanding the needs of the consumers, they feel more engaged, and then that engagement helps them to better understand the needs of the consumers. And we've learned a lot about the importance of bringing employees closer to the transformation, closer to consumers, closer to clarifying exactly what consumers are expecting from products. And that's something that people have really taken action from looking at this analysis and understanding what are the most impactful drivers for them. So what we gave every region, every function, and for strategic markets are reports that showed them then effectively where to take action. So we used a 2x2 grid. On the left-hand side, you can see on the axis, it was effectively the mean average score for the question. And also we did it for the dimension. And then on the bottom axis, you've got the impact on engagement. So that's just a classic regression key driver analysis, and it's looking at which questions are really driving engagement. So ultimately, what you'd want to take action on is the bottom right, those things that have a huge impact on engagement, and those things that you're not performing particularly well on, and therefore really need to improve, because those are the things that are really important to driving engagement and then driving ENPS. And so again, everything we're doing around insights is trying to simplify and simplify using quite advanced people analytics techniques, doing that at scale, industrializing that. So all of this ended up going through automated models that we could then pump out the insights into the hands of business leaders, managing directors for markets, so they can understand these are the things I need to improve in order to transform the organization, transform and bring on board our employees into that transformation as well. So the next steps for us, we have now gone through that transformation survey and gone through the action planning. We now have a cadence of quarterly pulses, which use a subset of the transformation questions, much lighter, still an annual transformation survey. And we're trying to systematize all of this into what we call the ENPS system. So we have that cadence of all employee surveys, the life cycle surveys, and then we also have surveys related to services that come from P&C. And we're trying to funnel all of that information in as simply as possible into, again, business leaders, and at the same time always giving them that analysis of what's important, where to focus, what's just noise, and what's really critical to take action on, and constantly having them think about where to take action, where they can have an impact in the inner loop, and then where the action really needs to be taken by perhaps a regional team or a global team, and that's the outer loop. And this is something that will take time for us to embed into the organization. I think we're at a good stage now where people understand that as a method, people understand all of the terminology here, but it's a different thing trying to scale this and having people constantly taking in data, constantly reviewing the data and the insights, and taking the right action when it happens. And where we've seen that happen at scale, and lots of markets have really been on the front foot in doing that, this is what drives the transformation. It's not just about communication, it's about giving the right data and scaling that and giving that alongside actionable insights all the time. So we'll get better and better at this. I think we're still on the journey, and it is a challenging one, but we're certainly seeing now good traction with the business, and actually a lot more pull in terms of people wanting more insights, even more data on a wider range of topics, and it being something that we're seeing a lot of leadership from more so from the business themselves that are looking to make that change. So I guess lessons learned from everything we've done so far. So I'd recommend to go fast. We've gone very fast in trying to do all of this at the same time, set up a lot within an 18-month period, but we always have to remind ourselves, are people ready, and is the business ready to do this? And we've structured it where we know we're going to have the biggest appetite for change and the biggest appetite for data. So in the transformation survey last year, we really targeted more strategic markets going through major change, markets that had released our new products and targeted like that. This year we feel ready that managers themselves will be in a good position to start receiving insights and data and thinking about for their own teams how to use Bayesian net analysis, key driver analysis in order to take the right action. That will take time, but we've tried to structure this really around where the business needs that insights and needs to change in relation to the transformation. Employees at the centre, perhaps an obvious one, but can be forgotten. We have at every stage continually engaged, not only in terms of what are the right questions to ask or what are the topics that are particularly important, but also in the process behind this. So we have an employee listening playbook, an employee experience playbook, all transparent, all online, everything in terms of the legal process and how we manage the data is all available there. And that's been really key, and particularly for some of the markets that were originally looking to stop some of this work. We've overcome that, we've brought them on board, and we've actually made lots of changes where we can now start to use verbatim comments. We've lowered thresholds on our anonymity thresholds, so we're really able to interrogate the data in lots of different ways because we've got that trust with the employees. I'd say prioritizing not only on parts of the business but also on the topics that are most critical. So for example, for employee experience, we started with the onboarding survey because we were onboarding so many people at the start of the transformation, bringing in specialist skills, and we wanted to make sure, we knew the business wanted to make sure that those people didn't end up leaving, that they didn't have a bit of a misalignment in terms of their role, misunderstanding in terms of who PMI is and the transformation. So onboarding as a process and as a journey was really, really critical. And we have constantly gone back and forth with the business on what are the topics that are most important. This year, for example, one of the most critical things we're looking to change is performance management process, and therefore we have a moments that matter survey at the end of year and the mid-year cycle for performance management. And we know that there'll be appetite for people to understand, is the change working, what's not working, what areas do we need to modify and make better. Last one, which is where people analytics team make the most difference, is gathering all of that data is difficult in itself, but it's not ultimately that valuable. The value comes in making sense of the data. And this is where all of the statistical techniques come into play, and choosing the right ones and bringing business leaders on board on what these mean, how they can use them, simplifying them as much as possible. We're using quite complex techniques, but they are seen as simplifying and actually cutting out a lot of things that people don't need to know in terms of responses, and prioritizing through the use of statistical analysis and ultimately insight. And we're digitizing as much as possible those insights, having key driver analysis available through dashboards, as well as having some executive reports and being mindful of what the consumers of those insights, how they like to consume their information, how they ultimately make decisions, and making sure that they're not just sent out, but they're discussed, that there's action planning meetings and there's a cycle that's well organized and that's well coordinated with data and insights in the middle. So I think that's everything. Very quick whistle-stop tour. Difficult to judge the audience whether I was going too fast, but probably I've left you with quite a lot of questions, and happy to answer those online or offline, and happy for anybody to follow up with any questions they have. So I was Mark Howarth, and yeah, really appreciate the time and hope that was useful for everyone. Thanks a lot.